Hello, everybody, and welcome to the March 2024 ACA Roundup. Really appreciate everybody joining us again this month. Just a note, this is I guess, the year anniversary of us starting to do these roundups. So we appreciate you guys coming back every month and again to get some industry news and learn a little bit more about the industry. So once again, just want to thank everybody for coming out and go ahead and dive in. Just as always, general structure of these webinars, we like to do them every month just to cover important news, make sure that everybody's staying up to date with everything. As always, we're going to be sending these slides out a little bit after we're done with the webinar, so keep an eye out for those. If there's anything in here that you want, any links or information you want to revisit, just watch out. We will have that slide sent to you afterwards, and then we'll also have the recording of this webinar posted on our agent portal as well, probably in the next day or so. So again, if you want to revisit this, all of these webinars, this one and all the past ones, are saved right there on the agent portal. So make sure you're checking them out if there's any information you want to remember. And again, if you have any questions during the presentation, go ahead and throw them in the Q&A area that you should see on the left side of your screen. Not going to answer questions live, but if you do submit a question there, we will get you an email answer as soon as we're able, again, probably in the next day or so, if not this afternoon. So if you do have any questions as we're going through, feel free to put them in there and we'll get your questions answered. All right, and so let's go ahead and get started just with some industry news. And oops, sorry, my slide changer went down. There we are. Excellent. All right, beautiful. So the first thing I wanted to talk about this month, since taxes are coming up, only a few more weeks left for most individuals to put their taxes in, getting a lot of questions about Form 1095A. Just a refresher, this is the form that your clients and consumers will have to use pretty much just in order to reconcile their advanced premium tax credits when they file their taxes. If you're not already familiar with this, which I'm sure most of you are, essentially this form just shows how much subsidy the government gave them. And since when they determine the subsidy amount, they're doing that with forecasted income, pretty much just when your clients file the taxes, they have to show the government, here's how much subsidy I received. The government will compare that to the income they actually made during the year. And if there's any differences between those two, essentially they'll just make it up during tax time. So probably going to get a lot of calls from clients who are looking for questions about this or who just are not able to find it. Just with the first one thing that I do like to remind, I didn't put it in the slides here, but I think it does bear repeating. And that's just that insurance agents aren't mandated to help the consumers with taxes. Again, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this, but if any of your clients are like mine, I'm sure a lot of you will get questions about how to file the taxes, how these work in. If these are answers that you know, obviously want to help your clients, but just a reminder too that you're not really obligated to help them file their taxes in that manner. So if you're not already a tax professional, sometimes it is best to recommend they go and speak with someone else who is a little bit more involved. With that being said, if your clients are just having trouble locating their 1095A, that is actually something that you can help them with. So most consumers will have the document either emailed to them or sent in the regular mail. They can also find it on their healthcare.gov account. That being said, I know a lot of them will reach out to their agent and ask you guys to find it for them. Easiest way for us to get that document is actually just going to be right on Health Sherpa. If you just search that client up in your dashboard and go into their page, under the application history section of the client's information page, you should see a form there with the 1095A that you can download. If you're looking at the 2024 application and you're not seeing it, my recommendation would be to go ahead and just check out their 2023 application as well. If you're not seeing that on your dashboard, you might just have to search the marketplace for them. But again, if they're asking you to help them, hopefully you would have the consent for them to search them and look up their 2023 plan. And then again, if in doubt, you can find this on healthcare.gov as well, both on the agent side and the client side. So a lot of ways that you can get that form. Just important to know because you'll more than likely get people asking if you haven't already. Just in case you need, I've just included some links and resources from Health Sherpa and CMS just about how you can access the 1095A and what it means and all that jazz in case you're interested in looking at it a little later. Next up, I wanted to talk just a little bit about DMIs or data matching issues or inconsistencies. They have a lot of different names that people use, but essentially this is when after a client has completed and submitted an application, sometimes the marketplace will need some more information to verify something that was on the application. Usually you're going to see these for things like the income amount or social security number if you didn't put that on the application, or even like citizenship status. But there are a whole laundry list of other things it could be, even though those are the most common ones. So typically when you see that, first of all, when you submit an application on Health Sherpa, at least, it will make it pretty clear if they do have a data matching issue. The clients will also be getting emails about these as well. And then as an agent, you'll probably start getting emails about these as well, usually once it gets closer to the deadline. But after submitting the application, clients will typically have between 90 and 95 days to provide the documentation that's needed. So that is about 3 months. So it's right in that window where there's a lot of wiggle room. They don't have to really jump on it immediately. But that being said, it is one of those things that very frequently gets forgotten or just kicked down the road until you're right at that deadline. So always better to take care of it sooner rather than later. But that being said, if a client has a data matching issue, their policy is not going to be affected in any way whatsoever. So it's not like you have to submit those for the policy to effectuate. Policy will still effectuate. Everything will go forward as usual. The only difference here is that if that deadline passes and they don't submit any documentation, your client might lose their subsidy, which does not cancel their plan, but a lot of times it's effectively the same. I think you can imagine if someone's paying $0 for a plan and they don't submit their citizenship documentation, all of a sudden their $0 plan will jump up to $500 or $1,000 a month. And for most clients, that will result in them canceling the plan. So it doesn't do it automatically, but that's usually a byproduct of the deadline not being met. So just important to meet those deadlines. And another question we get a lot is about commissions. So pending data matching issues don't affect commission payments at all. Commissions come from the carriers. They don't really care about the DMI so much as CMS and the marketplace does. So your commissions will still continue even if they haven't submitted the DMIs. But then the same thing as I just said, if that deadline hits, their subsidy is going to drastically increase. Their subsidy is going to go away, so their premiums will drastically increase. And most of the time, that will result in them canceling the policy, which will then result in commissions not getting paid out. But that being said, DMIs don't affect commissions as long as that policy is still active. And so if you're looking for DMIs, again, if you click into a client's page, you'll see a list right at the top of each client's page on Health Sherpa, and then you'll also see the submission deadline there as well. I've got an image right here. So again, if you click into any client's page, you'll see them right at the top. It's got the item that they need. So pay health premium or verify income. That's going to be something they have to submit documents for. You can see the status and the deadline there as well. And then once you want to, or if the client wants you to submit documentations for them, you can click on the verify button next to that DMI, and that will bring you to a page where you can actually submit documents on your client's behalf. And so when you click in there, it'll bring you to yet another page. And that's where you'll be able to upload the documents. But on this page too, you can also find a list of all acceptable documents for that DMI. So that's very useful as well. If you have a client who you know that they need to verify their income, if you click on that and go to the page where you would upload them, there's a drop-down list. I've got a screenshot right here where you'll actually be able to see every document that would work for that verification. So I've got a link in just a moment that also has all of that in one place. But it's a good thing to know. If you ever need it, you can do it right there. And then if your client is able to send you the document to provide to the marketplace, you can just upload it right on their Health page, and that'll take a little bit of work off of their side. And just a few more notes about the DMI submissions. After you do submit that documentation, just make sure to check back to make sure that the documents are accepted. When you'll upload them, you will notice that it can take a little while for the documents to be processed. Sometimes it's very quick. I've also seen some that take 3 to 4 weeks before they are approved. So just make sure you're checking back on those periodically, make sure that they were accepted, or if not, so that you can quickly turn around and get some new documents from your client. And then as well, it's always best to submit scanned documents or electronic copies instead of just pictures or images. But yeah, as I was saying, when you submit those documents, just make sure that you're using a scanned copy or an electronic copy. Just taking a picture, people will take a picture on their phone and put it up. A lot of times that's not going to work. And of course, too, if you're ever mailing in copies, just make sure that your clients are never mailing in original copies of these documents, because that can come back to bite them. And as I mentioned earlier, if you need any resources on this, then there is a article right there from Health Sherpa that's got a ton of information about this. And then right below that, the second one, this is, I think, one of my favorite bookmarks that I have. It's a list from healthcare.gov that has, for every possible DMI category, a list of all acceptable documents. I have that bookmarked on my computer. I use it all the time. If ever there's any questions about what document you can use, you can go there and they've got the whole list of everything possible. And then as well, I added a CMS video in there too that kind of explains a lot of this as well with some demonstrations. Right. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some new stuff that you're going to see on Health Sherpa as well. I've got some stuff about their exports that kind of tie into this a little later in the presentation. But first, I did want to mention these high-risk client flags that you're going to start seeing when you search the marketplace. So essentially, this is a functionality that Health Sherpa added not too long ago. So again, when you're searching the marketplace, you're going to start seeing this banner for clients that are considered quote unquote, high risk clients. And that essentially means they're likely to have enrollment submitted by other agents for the current plan year. And again, this will pop up while you are searching the marketplace. So it's not going to affect plans or their pages or anything like that. It's just kind of a notification while you're searching it that this is a client who has been searched a lot or has had multiple agents working on their profile. So some of the reasons why they can be determined, again, quote unquote, high risk. There's a few reasons, but the most common ones are going to be if, they provided their information to multiple agents. That makes sense. That's, of course, the most compliant way that this can happen if they've spoken with multiple people and given their consent to multiple agents, then they might show up there. But also on the maybe less so compliant side, a lot of things we'll see too is consumers responding to some targeted ads, oftentimes offering them some sort of reward or something like that, most commonly on social media. Sometimes that can get their information out there for other people to search them on the marketplace. Another pretty common thing as well is, unfortunately, lead vendors selling client information to multiple agents. I think everyone understands that. If there are multiple clients out there who have purchased this leads information, then you'll probably have multiple people searching them on the marketplace, reaching out to the client, and all that entails. So on that last note, I will just say, as always, be careful who you source leads from, and just always make sure that you're getting full consumer consent before you search the marketplace and start submitting applications or anything. It's just always good to follow up with the consumers personally to confirm that they do give you the consent, because some lead vendors may provide consent documentation or something along that lines. You can see I put the quotes in there for a very specific reason. Sometimes they will provide consent documentation, but CMS has said pretty much all of these forms are usually not going to be considered sufficient, as a lot of consumers will fill out these forms, not really understanding that they're signing up for health insurance coverage. Again, it's not super clear as to all the rules. So this isn't necessarily a blanket statement. But that being said, if you are purchasing leads, especially if you're purchasing them in bulk, always good to personally make sure that you do have the consent from that client before you just go and start searching them, because you never know where that lead is coming from. And then I also wanted to mention too, an update that a lot of people have seen, and that's that there is a new tab on every client page just for the household profile. And that's essentially just going to contain information about everyone in the household, not necessarily limited to just that policy. So it'll have their primary contact information, the members of the household, and then the biggest difference is that it's going to also have other applications associated with the client's household. And that may include other applications where you're not the agent of record. So essentially, it's just a page where you can see information for the entire household instead of just more narrowly for that client. Just a good thing that some people have noticed, and we wanted to point out as well, because there are circumstances where that can be exceptionally useful. Then I wanted to just move over to some O'Neill marketing news and updates. Not too much this month, but of course, as always, we've got a little bit of news from our contracting team. So really just a few high ticket items here. For people that have been asking, Blue Cross North Carolina contracting is set to reopen on April 1st. But the huge caveat for Blue Cross North Carolina, of course, is that it's a carrier that is only available to North Carolina residents. So unfortunately, as of right now, if you do not have a resident North Carolina license, you're not going to be able to get contracted with Blue Cross North Carolina. But if you do, and that's a carrier that you're looking for, just keep that April 1st date in mind. After that, contracting will open, be able to get you appointed there. And then Oscar, big question that people have been coming with. They had a kind of fluid blackout date. So it has kind of changed. So now they are saying that their blackout is slated to end on June 1st, and that will include for both direct agents and agents contracted under a different hierarchy on that June 1st date are going to be able to transfer their Oscar appointments to wherever they want. But it is really important to mention that Oscar has actually made a relatively short window of time where you can do these transfers. So as you can see in that second bullet down, they're actually only going to be allowing transfers from June 1st till the end of August. So it's only a 3-month window where you'll be able to do any transfers you need. So if you already have requested an Oscar transfer, that's fantastic. Once that opens up, our contracting team will reach out to you and let you know the next step and send you any documentations. If you haven't requested it yet, but you know you do want to, you can keep the June 1st deadline in mind and just wait until then. Or if you want, again, you can go ahead and proactively request that appointment now. And then once June 1st rolls around, our contracting team will already have that request and we'll get the ball rolling for you. But since they have this narrow limit, it is just really important that everyone that wants to transfer Oscar just keep an eye out for those emails from contracting at odmarketing.net and just make sure that you're following up on all the requests and emails and paperwork as soon as humanly possible, just because we don't want to see anybody that starts the process late and gets stuck for another open enrollment. And is not able to transfer over their appointments. So it is a pretty narrow limit, a lot shorter than most other carriers. But that being said, if you're keeping your eye out for everything and you're making sure that everything is moving along and all the documents are submitted, 3 months for the transfer shouldn't really be an issue. Once you get it submitted, everything should just kind of process. And unless there's anything that needs to be fixed or resubmitted, it really should go by itself after that. So I would just recommend that everyone keeps an eye out for that. And with Oscar, as with all other transfers, just make sure you're watching for emails from our contracting team and completing everything as soon as it hits your inbox. And I also just wanted to mention as well, just ancillary plans and ACA add-on plans. Very popular topic at this time of year, especially with some changes in ACA. So I always like to highlight these because I think they're very, very important products that not enough agents are taking advantage of. So essentially, these are plans that will go in addition to their regular ACA plan that's going to help them get better protection for themselves or for their family. And, it'll also help agents earn a little bit of extra commissions too. So generally, again, this is very broad strokes, but generally we think if someone's under 40, they could benefit from an accident plan. So God forbid any accidents happen, car crash, fall down the stairs, they have extra protection on their plan. Over 40, we think that pretty much most people could use a critical illness plan, just again, so that if anything does happen to them, they'll have just that extra protection to save them money and make sure that they aren't on the hook for just tons of medical bills. And really the reason that these are so important, if you don't mind me throwing a few statistics at you, this is something that I think a lot of people know, but about 2/3 of bankruptcies in the US are tied in some way, shape, or form to medical expenses or over large medical bills, essentially. And then of that 2/3, about 75% of them are already have health insurance. So these aren't, consumers who just never enrolled in an ACA plan or have never thought about health insurance. A huge amount of these people are folks that have health insurance, but once push comes to shove and something terrible happens, they don't have the money to pay for all these bills, even though they do have health insurance. And I think to insurance agents, this really does make sense. You see a lot of people with policies that have, upwards of five, six, seven, even $8,000 deductibles and out-of-pocket maximum. And I'm sure a lot of you know too, most Americans couldn't even pay a $1,000 or $2,000 bill if push came to shove. So it's really important, I think, to ask your clients. They get a $0 bronze plan. That premium works really well for them, of course. But I think it's always important to go one step further and ask these clients. The premium is good, but you have a $7,000 deductible. If something terrible happened tomorrow, do you have $7,000 so that you could cover your deductible before you hit your out-of-pocket max? And I think you'll find for most people the answer is unfortunately going to be no. And I think that's the place where an ACA add-on or an ancillary plan really would very much be beneficial to them. And it's always worth asking if they would be willing to pay maybe 20 or 30 extra dollars a month in order to have that better protection that will bring down their out-of-pocket max and deductible if anything does happen. So again, I really think that these are carriers that everyone should take advantage of. If you don't already have these appointments, I would highly recommend that you go ahead and get them. The top carriers that we have for this are going to be United Health One, a parent company or a related company to UHC. So United Health One is very good for these kind of plans, as well as National General or Allstate, and then SureBridge as well. I think those three carriers have some fantastic offerings for these kind of plans. So if you're not already appointed with these carriers, I would recommend that you go ahead and get those appointments now, just so that if it ever does come up and you do have any clients who you think would benefit from these, then you'll already have the appointments ready, and so you won't have to get everything started at that point. So again, I think this is something that pretty much all agents should be taking advantage of. O'Neill Marketing does have these contracts for you, so go ahead and request them on your portal, get those contracts and appointments under your belt, and then when it comes up, you'll be well prepared to offer these plans to the clients, get them better protection, and earn you a little commissions as well to make it worth your while. And then before I move into the last section of the webinar, I did just want to mention we have scheduled our April roundup. That's going to be on Tuesday, April 30th, so last Tuesday of April, again at 2 p.m. Eastern as always. If you want, we have the registration link right here in the slide, so when you get them, you can go ahead and sign up. Of course, as always, too, we'll be sending it out in emails as well. So just wanted to mention that here so you can go ahead and put it on your calendars for about a month out. Right. And then the last thing that I wanted to really discuss this afternoon was just about some health Sherpa exports. Most people already know about general health Sherpa exports, but there have been some changes and developments and new exports that we think are very, very useful for agents, especially with some things with the state of the market as it is today. So I just wanted to take a little time at the end of the webinar just to flag these and make sure that everyone's aware of these and kind of how they work and how you can access them. So just to start, just wanted to do the quick overview of just the basic health Sherpa clients export. This is probably the one that everyone here is hopefully at least already familiar with. This is just an export that you can get a list of all of your submission by you, an agent, or if you have an agency account, all those submissions for your downline agents. That is one thing I'll mention now. Pretty much all of the exports I'm about to say, agents can get them just for them individually, but then also agencies can also get these exports, and it'll be the same thing. It'll just include the information for all of your downline agents. So if you are an agency admin or you have an agency account, these are super important to know as well, because it's an easy way to keep track of all of downline agents and get all of their submission data just all in one spot. But back to the traditional compliance export, that's going to show a list of all the applications and submissions by an agent or an agency. When you pull this, you'll have to enter a date range. And one thing I do want to point out is that this date range is for the submission date. That includes any report changes, submissions, and all of that kind of stuff. Just important to keep in mind that it is the submission date and not the effectuation date. If you pull an export right now and just go back to January the 1st, you're not going to see probably a whole lot. You'll just probably want to go back to open enrollment or even further back. You can go back pretty much as far as you want, and as long as the export is able to be sent to you by Health Sherpa, there should be no issue. So you can pull an export that goes all the way back to 2012 if you want, and should have pretty much everything on there. And so this export, when you get it, you'll see it's got tons and tons and tons of columns. I'm not going to dive into all of them right here. That would be a full 2-hour webinar just in and of itself. But there is a lot of information on there, like the policy status, of course, information about the client, NPN used, the writing agent, if they're using NPN overrides, a lot more good stuff like that. So I do have a link right here on the slide where you can find legends. If you haven't already seen that, I would recommend that you take a peek at those legends for the export, because again, I mean, there's, I think, 75, 100, something like that, columns on it. So a ton of information that I think a lot of people just don't really know what to do with. So if nothing else, most people use these client exports. Take a look at that legend, learn what each column means, and kind of get a hang of that, so that when you look at these exports, all the information there will make a little bit more sense, and you'll be able to make heads or tails of it a little bit easier. And then another really useful clients export, kind of tied into what we talked about earlier, is going to be the DMI follow-ups exports. And so that export is going to have a list of all of your clients with DMIs that are due anytime in the future or at due dates in the past 2 months. So you can see upcoming DMIs and also any clients who, God forbid, maybe missed their DMI by just a little bit. That's very useful if you're doing outreach to try to make sure the documents are submitted. You can also filter your clients on the homepage to find this information. But if you're anything like me, I like to have it in an Excel spreadsheet just so I can manipulate it and do whatever I want with it. And I can save it for later without having to filter every time. So very good export to have, especially if you're looking to make sure that your clients are submitting all the documents that they need. And so next up, I wanted to talk about some of the newer exports that became available relatively recently, past few months, I would say, variable. So you'll see too now that for most agents, there's going to be a new tab on the left side of your screen that's just for exports. If you can't find the tab, it's likely that the agency you're a part of has that option not selected. So if you want to see the exports and you're not seeing that tab, go ahead and reach out to your agency admin and ask if they can turn that option on for you, because they're able to see all of it from their agency account. And I think these exports specifically are very, very useful for agents, especially at this time of year. So the two big exports that are on this tab that I want to point out specifically are the AOR at-risk clients exports and the EDE permission revoked clients exports. I'll get a little bit more into what both of those mean here in just a second. But I also did want to mention as well, a lot of this information is available in your client's dashboard, like the last one, without actually doing an export. So if you're on your client's dashboard, you'll see at the top there are two new tabs called at-risk AOR and EDE access revoked. And if you look into those tabs, it's going to show you a list of clients with pretty much all the same information as on the exports. So if you don't want to export the data and you don't want it in a spreadsheet format, that is still a good way that you can check them quickly or just keep track of them on the Health Sherpa account. So just keep in mind, if you're not a spreadsheet person, you can still check them right on Health Sherpa. So no reason to not be able to find these clients. But that being said, again, if you're like me, I really like to have it in a spreadsheet. I like the exports so that I can do everything and have that list in a physical copy that I can save for later. So I'll dig a little bit more into what each of these exports mean. So I'll start with the AOR at-risk clients export. I think this one kind of intuitively makes a little bit of sense to agents. Again, especially this time of the year and with a lot of stuff going on. This export was created to help agents like you guys proactively identify policies within your book where the AOR status might be at risk. So maybe another agent went and changed the policy or did this, that, or the other. And this is kind of a way that you can identify these policies without just necessarily going through and clicking into every single page or really becoming a expert sleuth or something like that. When you get an export with the AOR at-risk clients, you'll see just 2 columns on it. There's not a whole lot of information, but there is some stuff that you will see. So you will see columns for the client's FFM ID. You'll see a column with the URL for their Health Sherpa page, and then you'll also see the archive status, which will just be a yes or no. We'll just say whether it's archived or not. So pretty much the first 2 are the most important ones. Client page URL is super, super useful because you'll be able to just click on that, and that'll automatically redirect you over to the client's page where you'll be able to see the agent of record status. And this is worth noting as well, too, because the kind of less known thing is when you go into the client's page, that also triggers a new EDE sync with the marketplace. So what it does from Health Sherpa is it goes and it pulls in the most updated information from CMS on this policy, which is very useful. We talked about it a lot in the past, so I won't dwell on it too much. But one thing to keep in mind is with your regular client exports and all of that stuff, when you don't click into clients' pages, it doesn't necessarily update the information there. So if you're not clicking in and refreshing that EDE sync, you might actually be looking at some out-of-date information. So this is very useful to be aware of because when you get that export, you can click into the client's page, and then right on that page, of course, you want to check and make sure that the agent of record is still set to whatever it was originally written under and that everything else looks good. But it's good to know, too, that that will also refresh the information so that you can be certain that what you're looking at is the most up-to-date information about this client or this policy. And then at the end of that, if you do go there and you think that another agent has fraudulently changed the policy, just as always, make sure to contact the client just to make sure that they haven't spoken with any other agents or given consent to anybody else. And then if not, you can go ahead, report to CMS, do all of that stuff, which again, we have discussed before, so I won't dwell on it too much, except for just to end with, if your consent is still active, might still be able to fix the AOR as long as there's not an AOR lock from the carrier. So just always worth checking to see if they've given consent to another agent, because that will simplify the process going forward. Right. And then the other big export that I wanted to mention here too is the EDE permission revoked clients exports. I know that's a mouthful and might not make a lot of sense to most people. So first, I'll just start with kind of what the definition of the EDE permission part is. So EDE permission references the Health Sherpa data sync to CMS that holds the policy information from the health insurance marketplace. Kind of like what I said earlier, when you click into the page, it syncs and brings in the most current information about this policy from the marketplace. That's pretty much what this is referencing. But the important note is that only one agent can have the EDE permission for an enrollment at a time. So if you have that permission, you get the most updated, and then another client goes in and syncs it, they now have that EDE permission and you've lost yours. So your EDE information is maybe not even syncing with this policy anymore. That is the purpose of this export right here, is to point out those clients that you do have missing EDE permission for. And the important thing about this is there are a few reasons that the missing EDE permissions can happen. Some are more innocuous. Some, though, might mean that your AOR status is at risk. So one of the more innocuous ones would be if you imported the record and never established the EDE permission. It's something, it happens around the edges, but frankly, it's not super, super common. The next 2 are, in my experience, much more common, and that's going to be that an agent engaged with that policy or that client and severed your EDE permission, which could mean that your AOR status at risk, and that could be happening on Health Sherpa or on another EDE platform. So if someone is using maybe like Quoted or another tool, and they pull that policy in there, that's severs the EDE link with you and with Health Sherpa, and so it might not be refreshing. And so that's something that could be indicative of another agent changing the agent of record. And so that's why this export is super useful, because it will point that out for you. So this export, again, it's very very similar to the other one. It'll proactively identify those policies in your book where you don't have that EDE permission anymore, which might mean that you're no longer the AOR. So the export will contain pretty much the exact same columns as the AOR at risk. It'll have the FFM ID, the archive status, and then most importantly, the client page URL. Click on that URL. That'll bring you right into the client's page, which will refresh your EDE permission, getting you the most updated information. And you can also check your AOR status to make sure you're still the agent of record. And the last thing I will mention about this is, even though aesthetically these exports are very, very similar and they kind of cover a same purpose, it's still important to look at both of these exports because there are circumstances where some clients might just be on the AOR at risk or just on the EDE permission revoked export. So I would always say just go ahead and pull both exports if you're looking at them, and go ahead and just proactively go in and check on those clients, make sure you're still the agent of record, make sure that client is in your carrier book of business. And it's just an easy way to have these maybe risky policies pointed out to you so that you can go in and maybe narrow your checks a little bit more, instead of just going through and clicking on every single policy in your health Sherpa book of business. Of course, doing this for every single policy would be the most comprehensive way to do it, but that would be a lot of work, and we understand that most of you all have other things going on. So this is still something, though, that I would say is very, very important. So at the very least, pull both of these exports for your health Sherpa profile and just check on each of those clients and make sure that everything is still looking good, because this is something that health Sherpa is doing to kind of tamp down on a lot of the fraudulent enrollments and some of the nasty stuff like that is happening, and make sure that all of the agents are keeping their clients and earning commissions for everything. So if nothing else, I would highly, highly recommend that everybody take advantage of these exports, start looking into these clients, and follow up on anything that is looking a little amiss, and make sure that you're the AOR and you are getting credit for all the hard work you did during open enrollment. Right, and that is going to bring us to the end of this month's roundup. As always, really, really appreciate everybody joining us today. If you have any questions about this or anything else, feel free to give us a call, 813-489-4156. Send us an email to support@o'neillmarketing.net. We'll see them there. We're more than happy to assist you all with anything you needed. If there were any questions submitted today, we'll go ahead and we'll get to those, and expect to see an email answer to that the next little bit. So lastly, thank you all very much. As always, we really appreciate everything that you all do. Feel free to reach out if you need anything at all, and we look forward to speaking with you soon and seeing you next month. Bye-bye now.